Most people believe manipulation begins the moment someone lies to them. It doesn't. Manipulation begins long before a single word is spoken. It begins the moment someone discovers what you're afraid of, what you desperately want, what you can't bear to lose. Because from that moment on, they don't need to control your actions. They only need to control your emotions. Think about it. Have you ever agreed to something you didn't want to do, not because you were forced, but because you didn't want to disappoint someone? Have you ever apologized, even when deep down you knew you weren't wrong? Have you ever stayed in a relationship, a friendship, a workplace, simply because leaving made you feel guilty? If your answer is yes, then you've already experienced manipulation. And here's the frightening part. The person manipulating you may never have shouted. They may never have threatened you. They may never have insulted you. In fact, they may have smiled while doing it. That's why manipulation is one of the most misunderstood psychological systems in human behavior. It doesn't always wear the face of cruelty. Sometimes it wears the face of kindness. It sounds like concern. It disguises itself as love. It hides inside advice. It arrives wrapped in guilt. And because it feels so ordinary, millions of people never realize they're living inside it. The truth is, manipulation isn't about making people obey. It's about quietly shaping what they believe, what they feel, and eventually what they choose. The most skilled manipulators don't make decisions for you. They make you believe the decision was yours all along. And once that happens, you stop questioning them. You start questioning yourself. But what if there was another way? What if becoming impossible to be manipulated had nothing to do with arguing better, winning debates, or exposing toxic people? What if real psychological strength comes from something far quieter, something almost invisible? Today, we're going beneath behavior, beneath emotions, into the hidden operating system that every manipulator depends on. Because once you understand the system, you stop reacting to manipulation.
The invisible system. Imagine walking into a room where nobody raises their voice, nobody threatens you, nobody insults you, nobody forces you to do anything. Yet somehow, you walk out carrying guilt that wasn't yours. You begin doubting a decision you were once certain about. You apologize for setting a perfectly reasonable boundary. Nothing obvious happened, yet everything changed. That's because manipulation rarely attacks your freedom directly. It attacks something much easier, your perception. Most people think manipulation is about controlling behavior. It isn't. Behavior is only the final result. The real target is the story inside your mind. Every decision you make begins with a thought. Every thought creates an emotion. Every emotion pushes you toward an action. Manipulators understand this, whether consciously or instinctively. They know they don't need to force your hands if they can influence your thoughts. They don't need to lock the door if they can convince you not to leave. They don't need to silence your voice if they can make you afraid to speak. This is why the most effective manipulation is almost invisible. It doesn't feel like control, it feels like your own choice. Think about a child who grows up hearing, "If you really loved this family, you would do what we ask." At first, it's just a sentence, but over time, the brain connects love with obedience. Years later, that child becomes an adult who struggles to say no, not because they're weak, but because their mind has been trained to confuse guilt with love. Now think about a workplace. A manager says, "We're a family here." It sounds warm, it sounds supportive, until that same phrase is used to pressure employees into unpaid overtime or sacrificing their personal lives. Again, the manipulation isn't in the words, it's in the emotional meaning attached to them. Even friendships can follow this pattern. Someone says, "I guess I'll just handle everything myself." They never ask for help. They never accuse you directly. Yet suddenly, you feel responsible. That's not a request, it's emotional positioning. And once you feel responsible, your behavior begins to change. This is why manipulation appears everywhere, in families, in relationships, in workplaces, in advertising, on social media, even in politics. Different faces, different voices, the same psychological system. But here's the mistake most people make. They spend years studying manipulators instead of studying the parts of themselves that manipulation can reach. Because manipulation only succeeds when it finds something inside you to pull. Fear, loneliness, the need for approval, the fear of rejection, the need to always be seen as kind. These are not flaws, they're human, but when they're unconscious, they become doorways, and every manipulator is looking for a doorway. Which leads to a question that changes everything. What if becoming impossible to manipulate isn't about changing other people? What if it's about closing the doors they depend on? That's where the first psychological law begins.
The first law: the person who controls your emotions controls your decisions. Every manipulator understands one truth. They don't need to win an argument. They only need to change how you feel. Because the moment your emotions take over, your logic steps aside. Modern neuroscience has shown that our emotions heavily influence decision-making. Long before you believe you've made a rational choice, your brain has already begun preparing your response based on how safe, threatened, guilty, or rewarded you feel. Manipulators may not know the science, but they understand the pattern. They know an angry person is easier to provoke. A guilty person is easier to control. A fearful person is easier to direct. And someone desperate for approval will often surrender their own needs just to avoid rejection. Imagine someone criticizes you unfairly. Your heart rate rises, your breathing changes, your mind races. Suddenly, your only goal is to defend yourself. In that moment, you're no longer choosing your response. Your emotions are choosing for you. That's exactly where many manipulators want you, not because they've defeated your intelligence, but because they've interrupted it. This is why emotionally charged conversations so often end in regret. A spouse says something hurtful, and instead of pausing, the other person fires back with words they wish they could take back. A colleague makes a subtle insult in a meeting, and suddenly the discussion isn't about the project anymore, it's about protecting your pride. A friend knows exactly which old mistake to bring up, not to solve a problem, but to make you feel small enough to give in. Different situations, the same mechanism. Your emotions are being pulled like invisible strings. The strongest people aren't those who never feel emotion. They're the ones who notice their emotions before those emotions take the steering wheel. That's a very different kind of strength. It means recognizing the rush of anger without obeying it, feeling guilt without assuming you're guilty, experiencing fear without letting fear make the decision. Think of your emotions as an alarm system. An alarm tells you something deserves attention. It should never be the thing that decides your next move. The moment you can separate what you feel from what you choose, you've taken away one of a manipulator's greatest advantages. That's why emotionally grounded people are so difficult to manipulate. They still feel, they still care, but they refuse to let another person's behavior become the author of their own decisions. And once you understand that, you begin to realize something remarkable. The greatest defense against manipulation isn't a sharper tongue, it isn't a louder voice, it's a calmer mind. Because a calm mind sees what an emotional mind completely misses. And that's where the second law begins.
The second law: silence is not weakness, it's information control. One of the greatest lies we've been taught is that every attack deserves an immediate response. Someone insults you, respond. Someone accuses you, defend yourself. Someone twists your words, explain yourself. We've been conditioned to believe that silence means we've lost. But psychological reality often works in the opposite direction. The moment you feel compelled to react immediately, you've already surrendered one of your greatest advantages. Because every emotional reaction gives away information. It tells the other person what hurts you, what scares you, what makes you angry, what you're desperate to protect. To a manipulator, that's valuable data. Imagine someone makes a false accusation about you. You instantly launch into a 5-minute explanation. You repeat yourself. You become increasingly emotional. From your perspective, you're defending the truth. But from the manipulator's perspective, they're learning exactly where your emotional pressure points are. They now know which topics make you panic, which words make you over-explain, which accusations pull you into endless arguments. They've gained more than your attention. They've gained your psychological blueprint. Now imagine a different response. The accusation comes. You pause. You breathe. You refuse to let emotion make the first move. Maybe you respond with only a few calm words. Maybe you choose not to respond at all. Suddenly, something unexpected happens. The manipulator loses their map. They expected an emotional explosion. They expected fear. They expected you to chase their approval. Instead, they're met with uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable for people who rely on control. This doesn't mean you should remain silent in every situation. There are moments when truth must be spoken, when injustice must be confronted, when boundaries must be made unmistakably clear. But wisdom lies in knowing the difference between a response and a reaction. A reaction is immediate. It is driven by emotion. A response is intentional. It is guided by clarity. There's another reason silence is so powerful. When you stop filling every uncomfortable moment with words, you begin to notice what other people reveal. Their impatience, their contradictions, their desperation to regain control. Silence doesn't only protect your mind, it exposes theirs. The strongest people are rarely the fastest to speak. They observe first. They think before they answer. They understand that not every invitation to conflict deserves acceptance. Sometimes the most powerful sentence is the one you never say. Because peace is not found in winning every argument. Peace is found in refusing to let every argument become your battlefield. And once you stop feeding manipulation with emotional reactions, you'll notice something remarkable. Many manipulators don't become more powerful, they become more obvious. Because when they can no longer control your emotions, they begin revealing their own. And that leads us to the third psychological law. The less people know about your inner world, the less power they have to shape it. The third law. The less they know, the less they can use against you. Human beings have a natural desire to be understood. We want people to know our dreams, our fears, our struggles, our plans, our disappointments. It feels good to be seen. It feels good to be heard. And with the right people, that's healthy. But not everyone who listens is listening to understand you. Some people are listening to study you. Every conversation reveals something. What excites you, what hurts you, what you're insecure about, what you're willing to tolerate, what you're afraid to lose. To a genuine friend, those details create deeper connection. To a manipulator, they become tools. Imagine telling someone, "I hate disappointing people." It sounds harmless, but in the wrong hands, that sentence becomes a weapon. Suddenly, every request comes wrapped in guilt. Every favor becomes a test of your loyalty. Every boundary is met with, "I thought you cared about me." They don't need to force you. They simply remind you of the identity you've already revealed. Now imagine another example. You excitedly share your biggest dream. A healthy person encourages you. A manipulator quietly remembers it. Weeks later, when they want something from you, they say, "If you upset me, I don't think I can help you with your plans." Your dream has become leverage. This is why emotional intelligence includes something many people overlook: discernment. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your inner world. Privacy is not secrecy, it is wisdom. Think about a house. A wise homeowner doesn't leave every door unlocked simply because they have nothing to hide. They lock the doors because they value what is inside. Your mind deserves the same protection. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean refusing to trust anyone. It means allowing trust to grow with evidence, not with emotion alone. The strongest relationships are built over time. They are not built by revealing everything on the first conversation. Manipulators often rush intimacy. They ask deeply personal questions very early. They make you feel as though you've known them forever. They create a false sense of safety because they know one simple truth. The more they know about you, the easier they can predict you. And the easier they can predict you, the easier they can influence you. There is quiet strength in becoming less predictable, in speaking with intention instead of impulse, in understanding that every thought doesn't need an audience. Some victories happen because you acted wisely. Others happen because you never revealed your next move. And when people realize they can no longer read you like an open book, their strategies begin to fail. But even that isn't enough, because there is one mistake that causes countless people to lose their freedom even after recognizing manipulation. They set boundaries, but they never enforce them. And that's where the fourth law changes everything.
The fourth law: a boundary without consequences is only a suggestion. Most people think setting a boundary is enough. They believe that once they've clearly said, "I don't like being spoken to that way," or "please don't do that again," the problem should stop. But if you've ever dealt with a manipulator, you already know it usually doesn't. Why? Because manipulators don't respect words, they study patterns. They don't ask, "What did you say?" They ask, "What happened after you said it?" Imagine someone constantly interrupts your personal time. You tell them politely, "Please don't call me after 10 p.m. The next night they call again. You answer. You remind them of your boundary. The following week they call again. Once again, you answer. At that moment, your words and your actions are telling two different stories. Your words say, "This isn't acceptable." Your actions say, "Nothing changes if you ignore me." Human behavior follows consequences more consistently than conversations. This isn't just true for manipulators, it's true for all of us. We naturally learn from what behavior is rewarded and what behavior is not. That's why boundaries aren't really about controlling another person's behavior. They're about defining your own. A true boundary doesn't say, "You must stop doing this." It says, "If this continues, this is how I will respond." Notice the difference. One tries to control someone else. The other takes responsibility for your own choices. That's where real power begins. This applies everywhere. In families, in romantic relationships, in friendships, in the workplace, even in your relationship with yourself. Every time you tolerate what you've already decided is unacceptable, you quietly teach your own mind that your limits are negotiable. And over time, that doesn't just affect how others see you, it affects how you see yourself. Self-respect isn't built through motivational speeches. It's built through repeated evidence that your actions match your values. There is another reason boundaries often fail. Many people secretly hope their boundary will make the other person understand. But understanding has never been the requirement for respect. Someone doesn't have to agree with your boundary to recognize that you will honor it. That's why emotionally healthy people don't spend their lives convincing others to treat them well. They make decisions that protect their peace even when those decisions are uncomfortable.
Sometimes the most powerful boundary isn't spoken, it's walked. And when someone realizes that guilt no longer changes your decisions, that pressure no longer makes you surrender, that emotional games no longer earn your attention, they begin to understand something they never expected. You are no longer playing by the rules they relied on. But there's one final lesson that ties everything together. It's the lesson many manipulators fear the most. Because once you understand it, manipulation doesn't just become weaker, it becomes almost impossible.
The final law. The hardest person to manipulate is the one who no longer needs permission to be themselves. After studying manipulation for years, one pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Manipulators don't look for the strongest person. They look for the person who is still negotiating their worth. Someone who needs to be liked. Someone who fears disappointing others. Someone who apologizes simply to restore peace. Someone who believes their value depends on another person's approval. That's where manipulation finds its opening. Because when your identity depends on someone else's acceptance, they don't need to control your hands. They only need to threaten your sense of belonging. Suddenly, saying no feels dangerous. Walking away feels selfish. Disagreeing feels like rejection. And without realizing it, you've handed someone else the authority to decide how you feel about yourself. This is why manipulation is never just about behavior, it's about identity. The question beneath every manipulation is often the same. Who are you when someone refuses to approve of you? Are you still calm? Are you still certain? Are you still yourself? Or do you begin reshaping your personality until everyone else is comfortable? Many people spend their lives collecting approval without ever discovering themselves. They become experts at pleasing others, but strangers to their own values. And that's the quiet tragedy. Because the more you abandon yourself to keep others close, the further you drift from the person you were meant to become. Real psychological freedom begins with a simple but uncomfortable truth. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone will agree with you. Not everyone will stay. And none of those things determine your worth. The moment you stop chasing universal approval, you stop giving manipulative people the leverage they depended on. They can still criticize you. They can still misunderstand you. They can still attempt to provoke you, but they can no longer rewrite your identity. Think of a tree with deep roots. When the wind comes, the branches move, but the roots remain. The goal isn't to become emotionless, it's to become rooted. Rooted in your values, rooted in your principles, rooted in a clear understanding of who you are. Because when your identity comes from within, manipulation has nowhere left to attach itself. And that is the kind of strength that cannot be borrowed, cannot be bought, and cannot be taken away.
Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding about manipulation is believing that freedom comes when manipulators disappear. It doesn't. There will always be people who deceive, people who guilt trip, people who flatter when they want something, people who weaponize kindness, people who mistake your compassion for weakness. You cannot build a world where manipulation no longer exists, but you can build a mind where it no longer succeeds. That's the difference. The goal was never to become someone nobody tries to manipulate. The goal was to become someone whose mind cannot be easily occupied. Someone who pauses before reacting, who thinks before agreeing, who questions before believing, who protects their peace without apologizing for it. Because every time you choose awareness over impulse, every time you value truth over approval, every time you refuse to trade your identity for acceptance, you reclaim a part of yourself that manipulation was quietly stealing. And maybe that's what real freedom has always been. Not winning every argument, not exposing every liar, not proving everyone wrong, but becoming so deeply grounded in who you are that another person's behavior no longer dictates your inner world. Remember, manipulators don't fear loud people. They don't fear angry people. They don't even fear intelligent people. They fear people who are awake, people who can recognize emotional traps before stepping into them, People who cannot be rushed into decisions. People who don't need constant validation to know their worth. People whose boundaries are quiet but unwavering. If today's video changed the way you see manipulation, then don't let it stop here. The greatest battle you'll ever fight isn't against manipulative people. It's against the unconscious patterns within yourself that make manipulation possible. That's the work. That's the transformation. And that's how you become truly untouchable.